I used to think marriage was a bit like European architecture, strong bones, a little worn around the edges, but still worth photographing. That was before I took my wife on a dream vacation across Europe. 7 countries. For weeks. 1 suitcase filled with lies, and not all of them packed by me. Her name's Marissa. She used to be the kind of woman who lit up a room without striking a match, charming, curious, and, in retrospect, just enough mystery to make you nervous in hindsight. We'd been married for 8 years. No kids, a dog we named after a jazz musician, and a home office filled with passive-aggressive sticky notes. You know, the usual symbols of modern love. Now, this trip, it was her idea. A European tour, she said. To rekindle the flame. I didn't know the fire was out, but I booked it anyway. Paris, Rome, Prague, Barcelona, each city a postcard, each stop a little more strange. Not in the magical way. No, this was the kind of strange where your gut starts whispering things your heart refuses to hear. From day one, something was off. At first, it was small things. Her phone never left her hand. She took photos of churches but never of us. And she started doing this thing where she'd accidentally forget our dinner plans and disappear for a walk. At night. In Prague, I woke up at 2 a.m. and found her side of the bed cold. She came back an hour later smelling like cologne I don't wear. She said she'd been at the hotel bar reading. The bartender, when I asked him the next morning, told me she hadn't been there. At all. Interesting chapter, that. But the real red flag? Our tour guide. His name was Claude. French, of course. Mustache too perfect to be trusted. The man wore scarves even when it was 90 degrees out. One evening in Venice, after a long day of dodging pigeons and pretending we were still in love, Claude pulled me aside as we stood on a footbridge under the soft glow of twilight. Your wife, he said with a soft cluck of the tongue, she is not very modest. I blinked. I'm sorry. He gave me that look. The one that says, I know something you don't, but I'm about to enjoy watching you figure it out. Then he smiled, patted my shoulder, and walked off toward the gelato stand like he'd just dropped a bomb and wanted dessert. I stood there for a while, watching gondolas drift by, thinking maybe he meant she wore short dresses. Or maybe he meant her tips were too generous. Anything but what my gut was starting to scream. But that bridge, my friend, that bridge was the turning point. And I hadn't even opened the worst chapter yet. The next morning in Florence, she wore a sundress I hadn't seen before. Bright red. The kind of red that doesn't ask for attention, it demands it. We were supposed to hit the Uffizi Gallery, take touristy photos of David's confidence. But just before we left the hotel, she said, I think I'll do my own thing today. Her voice was casual, like she was deciding between decaf and espresso, not abandoning her husband in a foreign city. I tried not to show it bothered me. After all, who wants to be that guy? The one who gets possessive on vacation, reading insecurity into every footstep. So I nodded, smiled, and watched her walk out the lobby door like she was late for something she didn't want me to know about. Claude, our tour guide, caught up to me later that day. Alone again, he said, eyebrows raised. He always said things like that, questions disguised as accusations, dressed up in politeness. Your wife, she enjoys freedom, no? I didn't answer. Mostly because I was too busy pretending this wasn't happening. By now, the pattern was obvious. Every night, she vanished. Not for long, just enough to return with stories that didn't line up and excuses that sounded pre-rehearsed. She'd claim she was at a bookstore or a rooftop cafe. Once, she even said she got lost in the back alleys of Budapest, except I'd been there. Those alleys don't have jazz music and champagne corks. Meanwhile, I kept pretending everything was normal, smiling for selfies, posting captions like living our best life red hard, even though my gut felt like a twisted napkin. And Claude, bless him, never let up. In Vienna, he leaned over during a group dinner and whispered, you know, modesty is a funny thing. Some women wear loyalty like perfume subtle. Others? Like fire. I stared at him. What are you trying to tell me, Claude? He smiled that smug little smile again. Nothing. But you are a smart man. You will see. Europe reveals many things. I didn't know whether to punch him or thank him. But I did know this. I wasn't crazy. Not anymore. My wife wasn't just enjoying the culture. She was immersing herself. Deeply. Repeatedly. But I still didn't know with who. Not yet. That would come soon enough. And once it did, well, let's just say I stopped being the tourist and started being the storm. Rome was supposed to be romantic. Instead, it became the crime scene. By the time we reached the Eternal City, The only thing eternal between Marissa and me was the distance. Not physical, no. She still slept beside me every night, still smiled at waiters and posed for tourist photos. But emotionally, we might as well have been on separate continents. Still, I played my part. Ate the pasta, took the selfies, laughed at the wrong moments and nodded at the right ones. But under that smile, I was a man stockpiling suspicions like a Cold War spy. And I was about to get my proof. It happened on a Thursday. Warm evening. Cobblestones shining with the reflection of street lamps and tourists wearing expensive regret. Marissa claimed she was tired and wanted to skip dinner. I said fine. Told her I'd grab something quick. But I didn't leave. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. 15. Then I heard it. The sound of heels, clicking quickly down the hallway. Our door opened and shut in seconds. I moved fast, cracked it open, and followed from a distance. She didn't see me, of course. She never looked back anymore. She walked 2 blocks down Via Nazionale, then ducked into a small hotel, not ours. I stayed across the street, half in shadow, half in disbelief. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Then 20. And then he arrived. Tall. Confident. Wearing the kind of smugness you can't fake. He didn't knock. He just walked in like he owned the evening. Like he'd owned her before I ever suspected. I didn't go in. I didn't need to. The moment was loud enough. So I walked. All through the city. Past fountains and ruins and couples kissing on benches while my own marriage quietly decomposed 2 blocks behind me. I wasn't sad. I wasn't even angry. I was focused. When I returned to our hotel room around 2 a.m., she was already in bed. Hair wet from a guilt shower. Face turned to the wall like she was pretending to sleep. I didn't say a word. Just sat on the chair across the room and watched her back rise and fall like waves before a storm. The next morning, she acted normal. Asked if I wanted coffee. Told me we should check out a little museum she read about. I smiled, nodded, and began my plan. You see, I wasn't just going to leave. I was going to make her wish she had. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but I wasn't interested in temperature. I wanted it plated with precision, garnished with subtlety and a dash of irony. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to smile. That morning, over croissants and espresso, Marissa chatted about architecture like nothing had happened. She waved her hands in the air, describing how Roman columns felt eternal. I nodded, sipped my coffee, and mentally made a note. Even her metaphors are cheating on me. I wasn't going to confront her, not yet. That kind of emotional explosion? Too easy. Too expected. She wanted me to flip out. She wanted a messy ending. Tears. Accusations. Maybe even a dramatic breakup at the airport so she could tell the next guy I couldn't handle her truth. No, that's not how this was going to end. I've been watching her carefully for the past week, memorizing the script she was writing with every lie. She didn't just cheat. She choreographed it. Every night she disappeared like she was stepping off stage after playing the loving wife. I let her play, because I was writing a third act of my own. We had 4 days left in the tour. The final stretch. Florence, then back to Paris for a farewell dinner before everyone flew home. And that gave me just enough time. That afternoon, while she went shopping, her new favorite euphemism for vanishing, I stayed back and walked to an internet cafe 2 streets away. Wi-Fi was spotty in the hotel and I needed privacy. I logged into her tablet first, something she had grown careless with, probably assuming I was too heartbroken or stupid to look. I wasn't either. The evidence was all there. Photos, texts, voicemails. Somewhere between Florence and Prague, she'd gotten sloppy. And lucky for me, her secret Romeo wasn't too bright. He sent pictures with his face in the frame. A nice, clear selfie. One even had her kissing his cheek in front of a statue I recognized from earlier that day. She told me she was tired and stayed in the hotel. Turns out she was busy desecrating local landmarks with infidelity. I didn't delete anything. I forwarded it all to myself, to a backup email, and then to Claude, our tour guide. Yep, Claude and I had a little chat that morning after she left. I cornered him near the breakfast buffet while she was in the shower. You should have seen his face when I told him I knew. He didn't deny it. He didn't even blink. He just said, she is not the first, but she may be the worst. We made a deal. I asked him to help me arrange a little surprise for the final dinner in Paris. He agreed, with the kind of enthusiasm that made me wonder how often he gets to play moral accomplice. Maybe once a month? Either way, Claude was now on my team. By the time we reached Florence, I was practically cordial with Marissa. Polite. Warm. Not fake exactly, but smooth. The kind of smooth that makes someone think they got away with it. She even started relaxing around me, laughing again, holding my hand in public like a thief returning to the scene of the crime. I let her. In Florence, she bought a little dress. Red. Tight. Told me she was wearing it for our romantic farewell dinner back in Paris. I smiled. Perfect, I said. You'll look unforgettable. Because she would. On the final night in Paris, everything came together. The group gathered in a quaint bistro not far from the Seine, wine glasses clinking, music soft and jazzy in the background. Marissa was radiant. I'll give her that. That red dress did its job. Heads turned when she walked in, including mine. She sat beside me, fingers brushing mine lightly, probably thinking she had me under some kind of spell. Maybe she thought the lie was behind us, that I'd swallowed the betrayal and come out docile on the other side. That I'd pretend for her, or better yet, never figured it out. That was her mistake. Because halfway through the meal, after the main course was cleared and the waiter came to pour dessert wine, Claude stood up and tapped his glass. Ladies and gentlemen, he said with that melodramatic tour guide flourish, a toast. But not just to Paris or this beautiful meal. A toast to truth. And to clarity. The room fell into a polite silence. Marissa glanced at me, smiling. Then Claude continued. Sometimes on these trips, we experience art, food, history, and yes, sometimes we learn something unexpected. A personal history, perhaps. A private affair. The room murmured. Marissa's smile tightened. And since every story deserves a proper ending, Claude said, we've prepared a short presentation. He pointed to the corner, where a small projector screen dropped with a soft click. The lights dimmed, and the photos began. First, a scenic shot of the group in Venice, harmless. Then a photo of Marissa, walking alone, hand in hand with a man none of the group recognized. Then another. Her kissing him outside a hotel in Rome. Another. Her in the red dress, but not with me. The room gasped. Claude smiled. I didn't. Marissa's face went pale. She turned toward me, eyes wide. Logan, she whispered. What is this? Evidence, I said, sipping my wine. Would have made a great courtroom exhibit, but this setting felt more poetic. She stood up. How could you do this? How could I? I said, calmly. You disappeared every night like a magician without the courtesy of a final bow. I just wanted everyone to see your real trick. Someone in the group whispered, is that the same guy from Prague? Another chimed in, wow. I thought she was just tired. Marissa's face crumpled. But there were no tears. Just rage. Humiliation. She stormed out without saying another word. Claude raised his glass again. To Logan. I didn't toast. I just sat there in silence, watching the last image fade off the screen. It was the one where she kissed him. The perfect closing shot. Because sometimes the worst betrayal doesn't need revenge served hot. It just needs a well-lit projector, a room full of strangers, and the truth. You'd think a public betrayal expose would end with applause and a standing ovation. But what happens after the curtain drops? That's where the real play begins. After Marissa stormed out of the bistro, the room fell into a strange silence. Nobody clinked glasses anymore. The wine turned bitter. One woman in the corner muttered, I knew something was off with her. Another guy patted my shoulder like I was a widower at a funeral. Claude winked and bowed out quietly, like the stagehand he was, his job done. I stayed seated, not because I needed a moment, but because I wanted to give her a head start. You see, revenge doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes it's about letting someone sprint toward the exit and realize, a mile in, that there's nowhere left to run. She didn't come back to the hotel that night. No text. No call. I expected that. What I didn't expect was how quickly the trip turned into a solo adventure. The group gave me wide berth the next morning, like heartbreak was contagious and I was coughing regret. I was fine. Better than fine, honestly. I felt free. Not because I'd humiliated her. That was just the cherry. The real treat was clarity. That sweet, sobering moment when you realize someone's been poisoning your life slowly, and now, finally, it's out of your system. Her suitcase was gone from the room. So were her earrings, her silk robe, and the note I left on the desk. The note wasn't angry. It was factual. Dear Marissa, don't contact me again. My lawyer will be in touch. The rest of your things will be shipped to your sister's house, if I feel generous. You wore that red dress for him. I made sure the world got to see it. Consider it your final performance. L. Now, before you think this was the climax, let me assure you, it wasn't. This was only intermission. Because betrayal? It has layers. and I had more to uncover. Back home, I wasted no time. Within 48 hours of landing, I was sitting across from a divorce attorney who looked like she billed by the second and earned every dime. I handed her a flash drive, watched her eyebrows rise as she clicked through the contents, and said 6 of the most satisfying words I'd spoken in years. Take her for everything she's worth. She nodded. We will. Meanwhile, Marissa had gone radio silent. She didn't return to her house, which was wise because she no longer had a key. I'd changed the locks the second my plane touched down. She tried to go around me, called my sister, left a sob-story voicemail about how Logan embarrassed me in another country and just needs time to cool off. My sister, who once adored her, didn't even bother texting back. People forget. When you burn the bridge, you don't get to keep the view. A week passed. Then came the message. Not from her. From him. A name I hadn't known until the projector revealed his face, Dimitri. That was his name. Sounded like something out of a cologne ad, didn't it? He found me through social media. His message? Short. Nervous. Hey, man. Can we talk? I didn't know she was married. Thought you should know. She told me you were separated. I stared at the screen. Then laughed. Out loud. The kind of laugh that rattles around in your chest because it's equal parts humor and pity. I replied with one line. Sure. Let's meet. 2 days later, we sat across from each other at a greasy diner with cracked vinyl booths and an old jukebox that played Sinatra on loop. I ordered black coffee. He ordered herbal tea. Of course he did. He looked younger in person. Maybe 30. Clean cut. Probably thought Marissa was a glamorous older woman with sad eyes and an artist's soul. Classic bait. She told me you were controlling, he started. I sipped my coffee. She told me you were a mirage. Guess we both got lied to. He nodded sheepishly. I didn't mean to get involved. I thought I was helping her feel alive. You were, I said, but not in the way you think. He swallowed hard. I broke it off. Smart. Now take a number, she has a history. Then I dropped a napkin on the table and slid it across to him. On it was a list of names, dates, and hotel receipts. Not just from Europe. From the last 3 years. He blinked. You knew, even before the trip? I suspected, I said. Europe just gave me the chance to let her bury herself. Why share this with me? He asked. I stood up, tossed some cash on the table, and said, because you deserve to know what she is. And because when someone stabs you in the back, it's not enough to just pull the knife out, you hand it to them, let them see their reflection in the blade. He didn't reply, just stared at the napkin like it was radioactive. As I walked out of the diner, my phone buzzed. It was from Marissa. 3 words. I need closure. I stared at the screen, smiled, then typed. Closure's in the rear view, sweetheart. You missed the last exit. I hit send, then delete, then blocked her number. It was done. Really done this time. But even then, I knew this wasn't the final chapter. Because she still had one thing left to lose. And I was the man who'd take it from her without raising my voice or lifting a hand. Just a few strokes of a pen, a name change, a will, and the one friend she thought would always be on her side. You ever watch a chess game where the loser doesn't realize they've already lost 3 moves before the final one? That's where Marissa was now. Standing proud in a burning castle, smiling like the fire was romantic mood lighting. But I wasn't done. Humiliation in Paris? That was the overture. Locking her out of the house? Intermission. The real act, the one with the slow burn satisfaction, was already in motion, quietly ticking beneath her heels. It started with the bank accounts. I'd always handled the finances. She used to say numbers made her eyes glaze over. Convenient, considering she had no idea how much of the money was actually mine. What she did know, what she thought she knew, was that our accounts were joint. That she had access. She didn't anymore. By the time she landed back in the States, the shared accounts were closed, assets frozen pending legal review, and every credit card with my name on it canceled. I left her with exactly $73.41 in a checking account titled Paris Spending. Fitting. Next, I went after the one thing she loved even more than European architecture and mysterious strangers, her reputation. See, Marissa fancied herself an emotional wellness coach. Ironic, considering she couldn't emotionally navigate a weekend without blowing up someone's life. She had a small but loyal online following. She posted inspirational quotes, videos about authentic living, and hosted monthly Zoom calls for women looking to step into their power. So I gave them a little power of their own. I anonymously uploaded a compilation of screenshots, messages, photos, timestamps, even an audio clip or two. Nothing vulgar. Just facts. Her words. Her lies. One clip was her whispering, "He still thinks I'm working late." I could scream in this guy's face and he'd apologize. You'd be surprised how quickly the internet turns on a fraud once the mask slips. Her subscriber count didn't drop. It plummeted. Brands cut ties. Testimonials disappeared. She posted a frantic video 2 days later, crying softly, blaming a bitter ex for orchestrating a smear campaign. She even threw in the word narcissist for good measure, because these days, that's the emotional grenade people pull when logic fails. Comments were turned off in under an hour. But me? I was just getting started. The last move was always going to be personal. Marissa had one ally left. Her mother. A sharp-tongued widow who once told me I wasn't emotionally evolved enough for her daughter. The woman wore judgment like a designer scarf. Never missed a chance to remind me Marissa had options. Well, she ran out. Because you know who else she confided in during our marriage? Me. About everything. Including her mother's secret second mortgage, taken out 5 years ago to cover some gambling debt she swore was just a blip. Marissa begged me never to tell anyone. Said it would ruin her mother's pride. Guess what I mailed to their house? Yep. Copies of the loan documents. Debt statements. The letter from the bank warning of impending foreclosure if payments weren't resumed. And a simple note. From your emotionally unevolved ex-son-in-law. P.S. You should have bet on someone else. It wasn't malicious. It was educational. See, some people learn from pain. Others only respect it when it shows up with a return address. 2 days later, my lawyer called. She's furious, she said, barely concealing her amusement. She's asking for an emergency mediation. Let her ask, I replied. Let her write it in cursive. Then came the message that told me I'd hit the nerve. You're destroying everything. You've made your point. Now stop. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. That message was the victory. When someone who dismantled your world begs you to stop rebuilding in a way that no longer includes them, that's when you know. But the final piece? That came from someone unexpected. Her friend Claire. One of the few people who hadn't publicly chosen a side. She texted me one evening. Hey, I know it's not my place, but I think you should know. She's trying to get sympathy by saying you were abusive. I don't believe her. Just thought you should be aware. I stared at that message for a long time. Abusive? That was the one card she still had left in her deck. And she was reaching for it. Desperation makes cowards creative. So I did one more thing. I filed for a restraining order. Not because I was afraid of her, but because I needed a record. Legal. Documented. Traceable. I listed every false claim, every threat, every digital footprint. It wasn't about fear. It was about control. And just like that, her last move was gone. She tried calling me 3 times after that. I never answered. What could she possibly say? Sorry I ruined our life? Sorry I told people you were dangerous because you caught me cheating? No. She wanted closure? She got it. In paper form. In digital form. In the silence of a man who no longer needed to explain why he walked away from the fire, because he set the alarm, waited for everyone to wake up, and then locked the door behind him. It wasn't revenge. It was the return of balance. She wanted a Europe tour to find herself. I gave her a round trip to reality. There's a moment, after the dust settles, where everything feels quieter than it should. Not peaceful. Not calm. Just still, like the world hit pause while your soul recalibrates. I stood in my empty house one morning, coffee in hand, staring at the imprint on the couch where she used to sit. Funny how absence is weight. The house wasn't just quieter, it was lighter. No perfume trailing behind half-truths. No phone calls taken in bathrooms. No guilt bleeding through small talk. Freedom felt unfamiliar. The thing no one tells you after betrayal is that it doesn't end with revenge. There's a void afterward. Not sadness, but space. And space, if you're not careful, can start to look like loneliness. I took walks. Cooked for myself. Reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in years, the ones Marissa never liked, the ones she called low energy or not driven. Turns out, they were just honest. And honesty? That's high-octane fuel once you've been starving for it. I joined a gym. Not to get revenge fit. I just needed structure. Control. Something she hadn't touched. One night, I looked in the mirror and saw a different man. Not better. Not stronger. Just awake. The version of me before Marissa was hopeful, trusting, maybe even naive. The man staring back now? He had lines on his face, sharper eyes, and a quiet kind of armor you only earn when someone guts you with a smile. I didn't want her back, but I wanted answers. 2 months after the legal dust settled, I got a message from an unfamiliar number. Logan, please. One conversation. That's all I ask. I stared at the screen for 5 full minutes. Curiosity didn't drive me to reply. Control did. We met at a public park, neutral ground. She wore sunglasses big enough to hide half her face. Probably hoped they'd shield her shame. Or her bruised ego. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically. Just reduced. Thank you for coming, she said. I didn't respond. She sighed. I deserved the fallout. All of it. But you humiliated me. Publicly. You humiliated yourself, I said. I just brought a mirror. She bit her lip. I was unhappy. I didn't know how to say it. You didn't have to say it. You acted it. Every night. Every lie. Every walk. She looked away. I didn't love him. Then why? Silence. Then, finally, because he made me feel wanted. There it was. The thesis of her crime. She didn't cheat for love or lust. She cheated for validation. For applause. For the thrill of being chased by someone who didn't know her rot. I stood to leave. Wait, she said. Can we move forward? Not as a couple, obviously. But maybe someday friends. I looked her dead in the eyes. You buried us with a grin, Marissa. You don't get to be my gardener now. And I walked away. I wrote her a letter. Never planned to send it. It was more for me than her. A final purge. One last confession before I laid the past down for good. Dear Marissa, you didn't just break vows. You broke reality. You made me question what was real, what was imagined, and whether love is just a trick we agree to believe in. But here's what I learned. You didn't destroy me. You revealed me. You showed me the places I gave too much and received too little. The silences I filled with excuses. The loyalty I mistook for love. And the red flags I painted white because I didn't want to start over. So thank you for the lessons wrapped in betrayal. For the pain that reset my compass. For the fire that forced me to rebuild. You didn't ruin me. You released me. Sincerely. Logan. Then I burned it. Flamed ash. Closure without ceremony. Because some stories don't end with a final word. They end with silence. A year passed. No headlines. No drama. Just life, simple, honest, mine. I moved. New apartment, new town, smaller but brighter. I adopted a dog named Diesel. Loyal, loud, zero interest in gaslighting me. We took long walks and shared quiet mornings. He liked bacon. I liked peace. One morning, I ran into someone at the cafe near my place. Her name was Lily. She laughed with her whole face and didn't flinch when I mentioned the words divorce or ex-wife. We talked for hours. No games. No masks. Just real connection. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel haunted. I didn't feel suspicious. I just felt present. Lily asked me once if I'd ever want to be married again. I smiled. Not yet, I said. But I believe in it again. Just with the right person. And no red dresses. She laughed. And I realized I wasn't bitter anymore. I was better. Because healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering without bleeding. It means you tell your story not to relive it, but to release it. So that's what this was. Not a tale of heartbreak. A chronicle of survival. A reminder that when someone betrays you, you don't just lose them. You find yourself. And that, my friend, is the sweetest revenge of all.